You're 3 slides into the monthly business review. The CFO is leaning forward. She's looking at your gross margin walk and she says, what if we push the price increase to Q3 instead of Q2 and absorb another point of input cost inflation? Where does that leave us on full year EBITDA? Everyone looks at you. You know the answers in the model. You built the model, but it's 12 tabs deep. The price assumption feeds 4 different revenue streams, and the inflation override is buried somewhere in the COGS build. There's no version of this where you flex 2 assumptions and read the number off the screen in the next 10 seconds. So you say what every FP&A person in this situation has said at some point in their career. Let me get back to you on that. That moment, that's the gap I want to talk about in this video. Because here's the thing, the work you did to build that model was real work. The logic is sound, the assumptions are documented, the answer to her question generally is in there. The only problem is that getting it out in the room while the conversation is still live is almost impossible with the tools most finance teams use today. I've been on both sides of that table. At Procter & Gamble, I watched my boss save a presentation because he had memorized the sensitivities cold. At Squarespace, I sat in leadership meetings that got derailed because nobody could reconcile 2 numbers fast enough to keep the conversation moving. The pattern is the same everywhere I go. The constraint isn't your modeling skill. The constraint is the speed at which you can interrogate your own model when it matters most. So today, I'm going to show you a tool that's starting to close that gap. It's called Claude for Excel. It sits in a sidebar inside the spreadsheet you already use. It reads your workbook, follows the logic across tabs, and when you ask it a question, it cites the specific cells it's looking at so you can verify everything. Let's get into it. Before I show you anything, let me tell you what this tool actually is, because the name is a little misleading. Claude for Excel isn't a separate app. It isn't a replacement for Excel either. It's an add-in that lives in a sidebar on the right side of your spreadsheet. Excel still works exactly the way you know it. Your formulas, your formatting, your shortcuts, your muscle memory, none of that changes. That sidebar just sits there until you need it. Here's what makes it different from generic AI tools you may have tried. First, it reads your workbook, not a copy you paste in, the actual file you have open. Every tab, every formula, every named range. When you ask a question, it's looking at your real model, not a description of it. Second, every answer comes with cell-level citations. When Claude tells you something about your model, it shows you exactly which cells it pulled from. You can click the citation and Excel jumps you straight to that cell. This is the part that matters most for finance work. You're not asked to trust the output, you're given a path to verify it. Third, when it makes changes to your model, it preserves dependencies. If you ask it to flex an assumption, it doesn't override a hard-coded value in the middle of a formula. It updates the input cell and lets the existing logic flow through. Every change gets highlighted on the sheet and you can accept or reject it before anything is final. You're still the one in control. There's also an optional log feature that creates a separate tab tracking every action Claude takes in your session. If you're working on a model that someone else is going to review, or you want a record of what changed and why, you turn it on and it documents itself. A few practical notes before we dive in. You need a Claude Pro, Max, Team, or Enterprise plan. The add-in is free once you have one of those. You install it from the Microsoft AppSource Marketplace, the same place you'd get any other Excel add-in, and it shows up in your home ribbon up here. If you're on a corporate machine and you don't see the Marketplace, that's an IT setting, not a missing feature. Send your admin the deployment link in the description and they can roll it out to your team. One more thing I want to be upfront about. It's powerful, and for the workflows I'm going to show you, it works well, but it's not perfect. And the right mental model is to treat it like a sharp junior analyst. Capable, fast, but occasionally wrong. Always review the work before you ship it to a CFO or a client. Okay, with that out of the way, Let me show you the simplest, most universally useful thing this tool does. You're going to start with a problem every FP&A person has lived through. Here's the scenario. It's Monday morning. Your colleague who built the regional sales forecast left the company 2 weeks ago. The handoff doc was 3 bullet points. The CFO wants an updated forecast by Thursday. You open the file. 13 tabs, no documentation. The tab name sort of makes sense, but you have no idea which inputs feed which outputs, whether old version 3 is still being referenced anywhere, or what assumptions are baked into the revenue build. In the old world, you'd spend the next few hours clicking around with the trace precedence button, trying to reverse engineer somebody else's logic. That's the work I want you to stop doing. Before we go further, one thing worth flagging. I've watched a lot of finance teams adopt new tools over the years, and the pattern is consistent. AI doesn't fix a broken process. It just runs it faster. If your variance commentary is unstructured today, AI will produce unstructured commentary at scale. If your model has no standards, AI will help you break it more efficiently. The teams getting real value here are the ones who know what good looks like before they automate. To help with that, I put together 10 one-pagers covering standards I teach in my Wharton Online FP&A certificate program. Modeling, forecasting, variance analysis, business partnering. The link is at the top of the description. Grab it now so the workflows I'm about to show you actually land. Okay, back to the model. Watch what happens when you ask Claude to do the autopsy for you. I'll type in my first prompt. I just inherited this forecast model. Give me a 1-paragraph summary of what it does, then list the key input drivers, the main calculation tabs, and any tabs that look like they might be orphaned or no longer in use. Let's submit that. Note what's happening here. Claude is reading every tab, following the formula chain, and giving me a structured answer in about 30 seconds. And it noticed that there are a few issues. It found the old version 3, the orphan tab. Does it save to delete? Revenue is currently 0. Okay, that's okay. FX rates are never used. Scenario selector is decorative, forecast horizon mismatch, so there are a number of issues. But a part I want you to focus on is these little numbered citations next to each claim. When Claude says the revenue build is driven by volume times price by region, it's not making that up. It's pointing me at the specific cells where that logic lives. I click the citation and Excel takes me directly to that cell and I can see for myself. This is the part that matters. In finance, an answer you can't verify is worse than no answer at all. Cited output you can click into is the difference between a tool you'll actually use on a real model and a tool you'll stop trusting after the first time it gets something wrong. Okay, the autopsy gave me a lay of the land. Now I want to test trust at the next level. I'm going to pick the ugliest formula in this model and ask Claude to explain it. Take a look at this beauty. This is the kind of formula that gets built at 11 p.m. before a deadline and never gets revisited. If you didn't write it, reading it cold is genuinely hard. So I'll ask Claude. Explain what this formula in cell E5 is doing in plain English. Walk me through it step by step and tell me if you see any logic issues or risks. So 3 things happen here that are worth pausing on. First, the explanation is in plain English. Not this is an index match array formula, but it's look up Germany's premium product volume effective on or before the forecast date, multiply by Germany's unit price, then bump it up by the global inflation rate. If anything fails, show 0. Second, every reference Claude makes points to a real cell. When it says index returns the volume from I assumptions D12 to D47, I can click on that and verify. Third, and this is the one that matters most, Claude flagged something I didn't ask about. I asked it to explain the formula, and it also told me that it seems like this formula is not working. In fact, it's broken. It also suggests how to fix the formula. We could do that manually, but let's see if it can do this fix for me. In fact, it suggested here at the end, want me to rewrite the revenue formula across all 3 regional tabs? Yes, please. So now it asks me for permission because it makes real changes, and I'm going to say allow once. And we see that now the zeros are gone and revenue is now flowing. It notifies me that there are some other potential issues, but we're not going to look at those now, because now the next step here is to verify that this actually makes sense. Because while it's impressive, AI can make mistakes, so whenever it does something for you, you need to quickly do a sense check. Let's check the revenue for France, if that's correct. So to check that, I need volume and I need price. And so let's first get the volume from the assumptions tab. It's this for the premium unit. And then we'll get the price from the pricing sheet. Then we also need to account for the inflation adjustment. The inflation adjustment is here in F8. And then if we multiply the 3, we can see that the number is correct because we arrive at the same result as the formula that was created by the AI. So we just spent 5 minutes reading a model someone else built. Now I want to start changing it. This is where most FP&A people get nervous about AI tools. Reading is one thing, touching the model is another. So I want to walk you through 2 intermediate use cases that show how this actually works in practice and what kind of guardrails you have. The first one is scenario analysis, which I'd argue is a highly underused tool in FP&A. The second is headcount planning, which is one of the most painful manual tasks any analyst inherits. Here's where I always start when I'm explaining scenario discipline to a team. Most FP&A folks build a model with one set of assumptions, present it to the CFO, and then the CFO asks, but what if growth is lower? And now they're scrambling. Scenario discipline means you build the alternatives up front. 3 is the standard, base, upside, downside. The reason most people skip this isn't that they don't know how to do it. It's that doing it manually is genuinely tedious. You copy the tab, change a few cells, paste special the values, rename, repeat. And when the underlying model changes, you have to redo all 3. So some people decide not to do it. Watch what this looks like with Claude. Build me a 3-scenario summary on top of this model. Base is the current state. Upside assumes 3 percentage point faster revenue growth in each region, 2 percentage points lower COGS, and OPEX growth held flat. Downside assumes 3 percentage points slower revenue growth, 2 percentage points higher COGS, OPEX growth up 2 points, and global inflation at 5%. Laid out side by side with all assumptions visible above the outputs and dynamic. Show EBITDA, EBIT, and net income for each scenario. Let's submit it and see what it does. It asks for permission. A few things worth pointing out while it builds. First, it's putting the assumptions at the top, separate from the calculation cells. That's how a senior analyst would build this. The bad version of scenario analysis hides the deltas inside the formulas. The good version makes the differences readable at a glance. Second, it's preserving the formulas from my original summary tab. It's not overriding anything. The base column is my existing model. Upside and downside are new columns with flexed inputs feeding the same calculation logic. Okay, let's double check if the base scenario ties. It already told me that it checked that, but it's worth double checking because it's an easy check. We have net income up here and we see that it ties exactly. Now we're almost done here. The one thing crucial that's missing is I want to understand how the upside and downside compare to base. So let's ask Claude to add that. And voila, here we have the upside versus base and the downside versus base comparisons. Before we move forward, I noticed something that's slightly off. The way it's formatted, it doesn't show us the percentage points. The numbers are correct. We want 2% and it is 2%, but it's not displaying correctly. Now it's working on fixing that. And we see that it now displays correctly up here. And the formulas down here have a division by 100 built in. So let's test it and see if it's truly dynamic. I'm going to flex one assumption in the downside scenario. Let's say we want to test what happens if COGS pressure is worse than expected. I'll change the downside COGS delta from +2 points to +4 points. Before we make the change, let's note the difference in gross profit. It's ranging from close to 900,000 to 2.6 million here. Let's change it. And the model updated. Now we can see that there's a drastic change. It now ranges from 2.2 million to close to 4 million in gross profit variance. And that's the dependency-aware behavior I talked about earlier. I changed one input, it propagated through the whole calculation chain. And critically, I didn't break the base or upside columns. They're still using their own assumptions. This is the part most viewers miss, so I want to be explicit about it. In a manually built scenario table, this kind of change is brittle. You change something, then you have to remember which cells and which scenarios reference which inputs. You break things and don't notice for a day. With this build, the structure is clean enough that I can see every dependency on the screen. One more thing, let me ask this. What's driving the EBITDA gap between base and downside? This is what a senior FP&A person does mentally when they look at a scenario table. They decompose the gap. Claude is doing it explicitly. It tells me that it built a bridge at column R. Let's see if that's true. Yes. So it built a bridge here and it explains the differences. Roughly, it tells me most of the gap is coming from the COGS pressure. A meaningful chunk is the slower revenue growth, and a smaller piece is the OPEX change. That's the kind of attribution analysis you'd present to a CFO when she asks, where does the risk concentrate? If I'm running a finance team, I want every analyst doing this kind of decomposition. Most don't because it's mental work that takes time. Now it takes 10 seconds. One last thing before you go. Everything I showed you today, the model autopsy, formula fixes, the scenario builds, only pays off if you know what good looks like to start with. Speed without standards gets you to the wrong answer faster. If you want a clear picture of the standards that separate senior FP&A work from junior work, the ones I teach at Wharton Online and Inside FP&A, the 10 one-pagers are linked at the top of the description. Modeling, forecasting, variance analysis, business partnering, financial ratios. Free. If this video was useful, hit subscribe so you catch the next one. See you there.